The business class cabin fell utterly silent as the door opened. A man stepped in, his jacket faded, his backpack patched with tape. Beside him was his young son. The flight attendant frowned, pronouncing each word. "Sorry, sir. Seat 14C is business class." A man in row 11 let out a derisive chuckle, reeking of heavy cologne. "So first class now. Let's mechanics in too?" A woman in a purple dress tilted her head, her voice as precise as a blade. "They must have made a mistake. You can tell just by looking. He doesn't belong." The boy clutched his father's hand, asking softly, his voice carrying across the cabin, "Dad, why is everyone looking at us like we don't belong?" No one knew that the man they had just looked down on was the one the Air Force once called by a name that made an entire fighter squadron stand at attention. Iron Wolf. Daniel led Eli down the narrow aisle through the cabin. Glossy leather seats, the smell of roasted coffee, the scent of expensive perfume. Cold, piercing stares stuck to father and son like pins. Here, silence wasn't respect. It was a thick silence, the silence of judgment. Rachel, the flight attendant, stood blocking the seat. A polite smile, her voice felt like drowning someone underwater. "If you two would like to be more comfortable, there are plenty of seats left in economy." Daniel set the tickets in her hand, his voice low and flat. "We're in the right seats." Rachel's smile snagged for a beat. The man in 11A snorted, deliberately loud, probably used promo miles. "First class has turned into a bus." Eli looked up at his father, eyes confused. "Dad, what are promo miles?" Daniel put a hand on his son's shoulder, still looking straight ahead. "It doesn't matter. Sit down." The boy didn't know, but the whole cabin did. To them, the word promo was a sticker quick, convenient, and cruel. That alone was enough to push the two of them to the fringes. The woman in the purple dress turned slightly, speaking loud enough for Eli to hear. "We pay to avoid scenes like this." Daniel turned his head, his eyes cold as a knife's edge. "We have tickets, and we'll be quiet." Eli tugged his father's sleeve, his voice trembling. "Maybe we can go to the back." Daniel bent down, his voice softened, but each word carved itself into the air. "You belong here. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. This wasn't just reassurance. It was a vow." A father who knew what it was to be belittled was teaching his son, belonging doesn't come from clothes or watches. It comes from the truth that you have the right to be present. The whole cabin went silent, but no one breathed easier. This silence weighed like lead, because they had just been challenged inside their safe zone. The plane lurched hard. Red wine splashed, a dark crimson streak spreading over white linen like blood. A small scream slipped out, then was cut off at once. Eli panicked, gripping the armrest. "Dad?" Daniel set his calloused hand over the back of his son's hand. His voice steady and sure, like a familiar metronome. "Look at me. Breathe in, breathe out." "Good." The old man in the seat across wobbled. Daniel leaned over and tightened the man's seatbelt. The motion was quick, crisp, clean. No showing off. But anyone could see this wasn't how an ordinary person moved. It was the reflex of someone trained where life and death were neighbors. Rachel stood nearby. Her eyes flickered. Minutes ago they were full of annoyance. Now there was curiosity and a hint of respect. Masks fall fastest when crisis knocks. And in that moment, a man with a taped-up backpack proved more than any tailored suit in the cabin. The shaking stopped. A few awkward laughs rang out, trying to cover the worry. The man in 11A quietly put away his phone. The woman in the purple dress lowered her face to her napkin, avoiding Daniel's gaze. When people expose their own pettiness, they often prefer to bow their heads rather than justify themselves. The captain's voice came over the speaker, calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a minor technical advisory, the flight will be escorted for a few minutes. Please keep your seatbelts fastened. Eli pressed his face to the window, his innocent voice slicing through the heaviness. Dad, fighter jets. Daniel glanced out. 3 F-35s skimmed in parallel outside. Red and green position lights swept across the cabin. The engine hum rolled back in, low and dense, like thunder compressed in the chest of the sky. His heart skipped. The speaker crackled again, the captain's words slow and distinct. We've just received a special message from the Air Force. They request permission to honor a passenger on this flight. The one with the designation, Iron Wolf. The cabin froze. 11A's mouth opened and shut. The woman in the purple dress lowered her head. Rachel stood motionless, eyes fixed on Daniel. Eli turned, his clear voice ringing like a bell. Dad, who is Iron Wolf? Daniel didn't answer. His hand tightened around a silver coin in his chest pocket. The metal was ice cold. And in that instant, the entire cabin understood. The man they had just looked down on was the one in seat 14C. The man sat down, moving slowly and deliberately. The boy beside him set his comic book on the tray table, his small hand gripping the seat edge. The air around the two of them seemed to congeal, heavier than the recycled flow from the overhead vents. The man in row 11 raised his wine glass, swirling it so the light cast a red streak. He didn't look directly, he only smirked, but his voice carried, "These days, all it takes is racking up shopping points to sit here. Troubling, isn't it?" A snort from across the aisle. The woman in purple lifted her chin. There are things one should know their limits. The boy turned to his father, his voice small but clear, as if afraid to ask wrong yet unable to hold it in. Dad, are they talking about us? The man gave a slight nod, eyes forward. Listen, but don't hold on to it. Silence poured over the cabin again, dense and heavy. But it wasn't a comfortable silence. It felt like walking into a strange room and sensing every gaze pushing you back out the door. Flight attendant Rachel walked up, tablet in hand, her professional smile still pasted on. Sir, truly, economy might be more comfortable for the two of you. The man answered briefly, We're fine here. Rachel's smile stalled for half a second, then she turned away. In a place where every rule is written in money, his silence was a stronger resistance than any argument. The boy tugged his father's sleeve, whispering, eyes starting to glisten, I don't want anyone to be mad because of us. The man bent down, his eyes gentled, his voice low enough for the boy alone. You did nothing wrong. You're in your rightful seat. People who are angry are afraid of losing what they think belongs only to them. Some passengers deliberately pivoted their seats, creating more invisible distance. The kind measured not in centimeters, but in contempt. A sudden jolt sent the water tray in Rachel's hands skittering. Glasses clinked together, the sound bright and sharp, like an alarm. The man immediately twisted, securing the boy, then turned to steady Rachel's tray before it tipped over. Rachel paused, her gaze landing on the calloused hand gripping the crystal glass. That wasn't a normal reaction. It was compact, precise, and practiced for the unexpected. The boy looked at his father, eyes wide. Dad, how do you always know what to do first? The man only shook his head slightly. But the truth is, some skills never disappear, no matter how deep you try to bury them. Row 11 fell quiet, the man's hand still holding his wine glass. He didn't add another word, but the furrow in his brow carved deeper. Those used to imposing their will hate most being shown they are wrong. The plane steadied. Rachel righted the tray and gave a small nod. This time her smile was less fake. Respect flickered in her eyes. The whole cabin sank into a different silence. No more snorts. No more whispers. And yet the tension still stretched like a taut string that hadn't been released. The boy turned back to the window. Outside, the 3 F-35s still skimmed in formation, their red-green lights sweeping across the glass like electronic heartbeats. Dad, those planes look like they're protecting us. The man followed their path, lips pressed tight. The boy didn't know this wasn't just protection. It was a sign that the wall of the past was about to come down. The captain's mic clicked, his voice steady and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just received a special message from the Air Force. They request permission to honor a passenger on this flight. The one with the designation, Iron Wolf." The cabin went dead still. An entire row seemed to freeze. 11A opened his mouth, then closed it. The woman in the purple dress bowed over her napkin, fingers twisting the hem of her dress. Rachel stood still, her eyes toward the man and the boy. The boy turned, his eyes bright as glass, his voice carrying clear in the pin-drop silence. "Dad, who really is Iron Wolf?" The man didn't move. His fingers clenched the ice-cold metal in his chest pocket, the silver coin etched with a wolf, the thing he had hidden for 3 years. That innocent question slipped a blade beneath his armor. Truth always finds a way to surface, especially when you try to bury it deepest. And in that exact moment, the whole cabin knew that the name just spoken didn't belong to anyone else. It belonged to the man they had dismissed the second he stepped through that door. The cabin remained utterly silent. The 3 words, Iron Wolf, hung in the air like an invisible indictment. The man sat motionless. The boy beside him looked at his father, eyes both bewildered and worried. 11A coughed lightly, trying to crack the silence. Perhaps someone on board just has the same name. But his voice shook. Even he didn't believe himself. Those used to imposing their will can't handle it when truth smacks them in the face. The woman in purple adjusted her stole, her voice sharp but less certain than before. "It must be a mistake. There's no one like that." Here, the boy turned, his voice clear. "Dad, who is Iron Wolf, really?" The man looked at his son, eyes holding something only the boy could see. A long pause, as though he were wrestling between silence and admission. Flight attendant Rachel stood nearby, eyes fixed on the hand he kept clenched in his pocket. There was no annoyance left, only expectation. People can pretend not to know, but instincts rarely lie. A younger passenger in row 12 whispered to a friend, "I heard Iron Wolf was the code name of a cyber defense strategist. They say he stopped a military network attack a few years back." It was quiet enough for only 2 or 3 to hear, but in a cabin this still, it spread like ink on paper. 11A cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Whoever it is, we paid for quiet here, not for some hero script." The boy turned, his eyes clear, but his voice suddenly razor sharp. "Sir, how do you know a hero can't sit here?" The whole cabin jolted. A simple question, but it flipped the board. Sometimes the innocence of a child cut straight through the thick padding of prejudice. 11A was struck dumb, his lips moving without words. Rachel bowed slightly and set a water tray before the 2 of them, her voice lower now, honest. "Do you need anything else, sir?" It was the first time since they'd boarded that she didn't speak down to them. What she had just witnessed had shifted her stance. When people are forced to look at courage head-on, it's hard to hold on to contempt. The man shook his head, his voice even. "We're fine." The plane shivered again. Not hard, but enough to clench every heart. The lights flickered, flashing anxious faces. The man reached to tighten his son's seatbelt. The boy sat still, obedient, his eyes still shining. For the first time, there was a spark in them, a belief that his father was not just a mechanic, as he'd thought. An old man in row 13 leaned over, voice trembling. "Forgive me. I served before. The way you move, that's not civilian." "Were you?" The man gave a slight nod, neither confirming nor denying. Silence is sometimes stronger than 1,000 words. And that very silence made business class grow tauter still. Everyone could see, but no one dared say it. The boy looked at his father and whispered again, so soft only they could hear, "Dad, I'm proud of you, whoever you are." The man's eyes wavered. A child's sentence pierced the shell he'd tried to build for 3 years. Some truths can't be hidden forever. Because it isn't others who unmask us. The clearest mirror is the open gaze of a child. Outside, the F-35 engines kept their steady rumble, each beat a reminder. The past never truly left. The captain's voice came on, low but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We will make an emergency landing for inspection." The military is ready to assist. Gasps spread through the cabin. Passengers worried about their schedules, but none dared to sneer anymore. They had seen enough to know this man's presence was no ordinary thing. The plane began its descent. The seatbelt light glowed red. The boy clutched his father's hand. "Dad, what will they do to us?" The man didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed forward, cold as steel, but when he bent down, his voice was strangely gentle. "They just want to make sure we're safe." Half the truth. Because he knew this flight wasn't just reaching a destination. It was about to become the place where past and present collided, and nothing could stop it. The plane jolted lightly as wheels touched the runway. Everyone held their breath. The cabin door hadn't opened, but anticipation was tight as a string. Everyone knew something was waiting the moment it did. The wheels slammed down, a muffled thud vibrating through the steel frame. The jet skidded, slowed. The cabin held its breath, as if knowing what awaited outside wasn't just a technical stop. The red seatbelt light still glowed. The captain's calm voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just landed at Andrews Air Force Base. Please remain in your seats. The door will open in a few minutes as requested by Security Forces Air Force Base." The words alone sent a chill down the cabin. Those who had sneered no longer dared look at each other. The boy tugged his father's sleeve, whispering, "Dad, why are we getting off here?" The man leaned down, his voice soft, though his eyes stayed fixed on the flood of military headlights outside. "Because they need to be sure. Stay by my side and it will be fine." Outside, figures appeared. 3 officers in flight suits, striding with crisp steps. Spotlights flared off helmets tucked under their arms. Each footfall beat time to the tension in the cabin. The cabin door hissed open. Cold air swept in. And then a woman's voice rang out, sharp and firm, slicing the air in two. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need to see the passenger with the designation Iron Wolf." Silence. No whispers, no snorts. Only the pounding of hearts. 11A swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Perhaps none of us here. Some kind of mistake?" The female officer stepped forward, her eyes sweeping the cabin. Not curious, commanding. She paused a beat at row 14. The boy gripped his father's hand, his voice small but carrying clear in the frozen cabin. "Dad, are they looking for you?" The man's hands clenched in his pocket. The silver coin burned cold, a reminder that truth could not be hidden longer. The woman's voice came again, this time leaving no room. "Iron Wolf, if you are present, please stand." Eyes turned. The woman in purple bit her lip, unable to look up. Rachel stood still, her gaze fixed on the man's face. Silence strung the cabin taut. No one dared breathe. 11A broke suddenly. "Officer, I paid for a first-class seat, but I assure you, we're all civilians here." "No one by that name." The words rang out, but instead of release, they thickened the air. Because when truth is that clear, denial only exposes fear. The boy turned, eyes bright, voice trembling yet fierce. "Dad, don't stay silent anymore." The man closed his eyes for a moment. Then he stood, slowly. Each motion sounded like thunder in the dead cabin. All eyes fixed on him. They had been used to seeing him as an outsider. Now that straight-backed posture made the glossy leather seats look small. The female officer stiffened, then straightened, her voice dropping, laced with respect. "Welcome back, Iron Wolf." The cabin erupted. Whispers shattered like glass. The woman in purple let her scarf slip. 11A gaped, lips working without words. Rachel stood tall, her fake smile gone, replaced with silent reverence. The boy looked up, eyes wide, his voice pure. "Dad, Is it really you?" The man bent, touched his son's shoulder, his voice low. "There are things I haven't told you. But yes, they're calling me," and at that moment, every mask fell. A father once scorned for a worn backpack was honored before all. Two younger officers entered, standing at attention, eyes filled with respect. One spoke, voice like steel. "Sir, we are students of the system you designed. Without you, many of us would not be alive to stand here." The cabin sank into a silence of another kind. Not judgment, but shame. Realization. 11A bowed his head, muttering, I didn't know." The boy squeezed his father's hand. This time not fear, but pride. Outside, the roar of F-35s thundered steady, a reminder that justice may come late, but when it arrives, it strips away every pretense. The man stood tall at row 14. The two young officers stepped forward, snapping salutes sharp as blades. Respect in their eyes stunned the cabin. The female officer advanced half a step, her voice ringing like a command. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are seated with one of the finest cyber defense strategists the U.S. Air Force has ever had. Call sign, Iron Wolf." The sound split the air. Every gaze shot toward the man scorned minutes earlier. The boy looked up, whispering, "Dad, they really mean you?" The man nodded. No boasting, just quiet acknowledgement. And that silence spoke louder than any speech. The younger male officer stepped forward, voice thick with emotion. "In 2018, your system stopped a cyber attack on the entire command network in Syria. Without you, dozens of pilots would not have returned. My teammates among them." The cabin rippled with murmurs spreading like waves. The woman in purple trembled, lowering her face, whispering, "My God." The once arrogant 11A paled like paper. He stammered, I didn't know. I truly didn't know." That was the difference. Those who once sneered when faced with truth had only shame left. Rachel, the attendant, stepped forward slowly, her eyes no longer indifferent. She bowed her head. "Sir, I owe you an apology. I didn't recognize you." The man shook his head, his voice low, even, "No need." People usually only see the surface, a short sentence, but it was a mirror. For how long had they judged by fabric, watches, tickets? The female officer spoke again, this time like a commendation on a battlefield. "Iron Wolf rebuilt the entire training simulation system after the 2015 crisis. Over 200 of our current pilots were trained with the protocol he wrote. They are alive and they are flying because of his dedication." The cabin froze. No one dared breathe. The boy turned to his father, eyes shining. "Dad, I didn't know you had done so much." The man rested a hand on his son's shoulder, voice soft. "There are things I've done. No one needs to know. What matters is keeping families safe. Just like I keep you safe." The younger officer stepped closer, his eyes bright. "Sir, without you, I wouldn't be alive to stand here. I will never forget 11, a bent low, voice shaking. I'm sorry. I was wrong. My words were unworthy, but late apologies ring weakest." Everyone remembered his sneers only minutes earlier. That contrast itself was the heaviest verdict. The woman in purple slowly rose, her trembling hand extended. "Please, forgive my foolishness." The man glanced once, his eyes cold but not cruel. No forgiveness needed. People reveal themselves most when they think no one is watching. "Today you showed who you are." The cabin shuddered. Sometimes one sentence weighs more than a verdict. Rachel bit her lip, then exhaled, her voice small. "Sir, if I can, I want to make amends. Perhaps a donation to the Young Veterans Fund in your son's name?" The boy's eyes lit. The man nodded, his voice gentler now. "That would be best." In that moment, apology became action. Because words are easy, deeds are real. Outside, jet engines still roared steady. Red-green lights flickered through glass like heartbeats of a past no longer hidden. Inside, no more snorts, no more jeers, only silence mixed with respect. The boy leaned in, whispering softly, just for his father, "Dad, I'm proud." The man squeezed his son's hand, his voice quiet but firm, "And I'm proud of you. Remember always, you don't need wealth or fine clothes to be respected. You only need to hold to the truth." The female officer stood tall, clutching her helmet, her voice now not introduction but commanding plea, "Iron Wolf, we need you back." The cabin held its breath. They had just digested the truth of his identity. Now another layer, a direct call from the military in the middle of a civilian flight. The man stayed silent. His eyes stared forward, unblinking. The boy beside him tugged his hand, whispering, "Dad, what are they saying?" He bent down, his eyes softening. "They want me to do my old job again." "But what was your old job?" The boy's voice was clear, but behind it lingered a fear he couldn't yet name. The younger male officer stepped up, urgent, "Sir, this is not just an invitation. This is an emergency. The training systems are under attack. Young pilots are in danger. We need the original architect of the protocol to restore it." The cabin fell silent. Passengers didn't grasp every word, but they felt the weight. None dared to belittle him now. 11A, once mocking, now spoke timidly. "You mean if he doesn't return, pilots could die?" The female officer nodded, blunt, "Yes." The answer landed like a stone in a tense lake. Ripples spread across the cabin. The woman in purple clutched her bag, eyes misting. At such moments, pettiness had no place against human lives. The boy turned fully toward his father, his eyes bright. "Dad, they need your help. Like when my friend took my toy, you said, 'If we don't stand up, someone else will be bullied too.'" An innocent line, but it struck home. Sometimes right and wrong are simpler than we admit. The man exhaled, shaking his head. "Son, going back means leaving you. It means I'll have to go away, at least for a while." The boy gripped his hand tightly, shaking his head hard. "No, I'll come with you. Wherever you are, that's home." The business class cabin froze, because in that child's words lay a truth adults rarely consider. Family isn't measured in first-class tickets, but in who won't leave when hardship comes. The female officer stepped forward, her voice steady. "We've prepared. If you agree, both you and your son will be protected in the military zone. Eli will be absolutely safe. We won't make you choose between country and family." Rachel shivered slightly. She had never seen such a scene, a negotiation between duty and fatherhood, playing out in the very cabin she served. And she realized true worth wasn't in a uniform or a diamond-tier card. It was in decisions made in silence, without rehearsal. The man's gaze hardened. "I've been gone 3 years. I chose family. I don't want to return." The younger officer clenched his fists, eyes desperate. "But sir, the very ones destroying the system once learned from you. They know your methods, and they're twisting them into weapons. Only you can stop them." The air reeked of tension. Passengers sat stiff, as if they too were witnesses to a decision that could cost hundreds of lives. 11A whispered, stripped of arrogance, "If you can save them, please do. Not for us, for those out there." The woman in purple nodded, eyes wet. "You owe me nothing. But those young soldiers, they deserve it." The boy tugged his father's sleeve, his innocent eyes shining like lamps. "Dad, if someone takes away the firefighter's ladder, how can they rescue people?" He looked at his son. His chest tightened. A simple metaphor, brutal in its clarity, impossible to refute. That was the moment truth knocked. Silence was no longer an option. He raised his head, his voice low but firm. "All right, I'll help. But my son must always be safe." The female officer nodded quickly, relief flooding her eyes. "We promise. The entire force will protect Eli." The boy exhaled in relief, squeezing his father's hand, whispering, "I'm proud of you." Business class seemed to transform. Where it had stunk of disdain, now it brimmed with respect. They realized they had witnessed something rare, a man standing between family and country and abandoning neither. The cabin door opened wider. Cold wind swept in, carrying the harsh white glare of military floodlights across the carpet. The shadows of 3 officers stretched long. The man gripped his son's hand, then gave a small nod. He didn't need words. Silence itself confirmed his decision. The female officer gestured. The 2 young officers stood sharp, one on each side, opening the way. Rachel bowed, her voice trembling softly. "Sir, good luck." She was no longer a flight attendant serving passengers. She was a human being speaking from the heart. The man gave a slight nod. "Thank you." The cabin was silent. But unlike when he'd first entered, this silence was no longer judgment. Now it was respect mixed with regret. The woman in purple rose, her hands trembling. "Please, forgive my foolishness. I forgot that. No one has the right to judge others by clothing." He paused, eyes steady, then said softly, "People show themselves most when they think no one is watching." Remember that the words fell heavier than forgiveness. They were a warning. 11A bent deeply, pride gone. I'm sorry. I want to make amends. I'll donate to the Veterans Fund in your son's name if you allow." The boy looked up, eyes glowing. The man nodded, his voice gentler this time. "That would be best. Repentance isn't in words. It must turn into action." And at that moment, 2 former mockers had learned that lesson. From the rear, a younger passenger suddenly spoke. "Sir, I have a brother serving. If he's still flying today, perhaps it's thanks to your work." "I thank you." The cabin rippled. True gratitude was rare in a place built on privilege. Yet now, each understood they had seen something far beyond first-class tickets. The female officer signaled again. "We must go now, sir." The man tightened his grip on his son. They walked toward the door. Each step, the whole cabin sat still, eyes following. No one dared utter contempt anymore. What remained was respect mixed with shame. As their figures receded, 11A whispered, his voice clear in the hush. "Truly, we misjudged worth." Out in the jet bridge, white floodlights swept harshly. The stomp of military boots echoed steady and firm. The boy looked around, tense but wide-eyed with curiosity. "Dad, are all these people your friends?" The man gave a faint smile. "They're comrades. And comrades never disappear, even if you leave." The boy squeezed his father's hand tighter. "I'm your comrade too." He nodded, eyes wavering. "Yes, you're the most important comrade out there. Wars were fought with bullets. But for a father, the real battle was always keeping promises to his child." The young officer's radio crackled. A voice from headquarters cut through. "Confirmed, the saboteur has planted malware in the new simulator version. He has high-level access, once part of the original development team." The man froze. His eyes flashed, then darkened. "So, someone I once trusted." The female officer nodded, her voice heavy. "We need you to trace him. He knows the original protocol, because you wrote it." The boy looked up, eyes filled with both worry and wonder. "Dad, was he your friend?" The man shook his head slowly, his gaze hardening. "Not a friend anymore. Just a traitor." The group stopped before a steel door leading to the tarmac stairs. Outside, 3 F-35s waited, their strobe lights slicing the night. The young officer whispered, his tone reverent. "Sir Iron Wolf, we believe only you can catch him." The man stared into the darkness ahead, his eyes sharp as steel. "Then it's time to end his game." The boy squeezed his father's hand again. "I'm going with you, right?" He nodded, his voice low but warm. always. The steel corridor blazed white. Neon lights flickered overhead, fluorescent buzzing like a swarm of bees. No glossy first-class seats, no clinking crystal glasses. Here it was only the stench of fuel, the tang of metal, the chill of the military. Daniel Harris walked between two officers. Eli clutched his hand, his worn shoes scraping the floor. The boy's eyes darted around, curious yet tense. A steel door swung open, revealing a makeshift operations room. Metal table, large screen flickering with digital maps. 3 uniformed men waited, rank heavy on their shoulders. In the center, a woman in a dark suit, no insignia, her gaze sharp and calculating. The female officer gave a brief introduction. "This is Director Hayes, Special Investigations." Hayes did not offer a handshake. She looked straight at Daniel, her voice direct. "We've traced the breach." The malware came from inside. The writer was once part of the Iron Wolf protocol team. Daniel tightened his grip on the frayed strap of his backpack. He had already guessed the answer. Who? Hayes turned the screen slowly. A face lit up. Clear. Morrison. He stood by you, 2016 to 2019. The air thickened. Eli looked up, whispering, "Dad, was he your friend?" Daniel shook his head, eyes dark. "Not anymore. Not since he chose betrayal." The screen scrolled lines of code, spilling like rain. Symbols meaningless to most, but to Daniel they pierced like knives into memory. He had written each safeguard, each line of defense, now twisted, turned into deadly traps. A young officer spoke, tense. "We tried to disable it, but he knows the procedures. Every door we close, he opens 2 more. Daniel stepped forward, eyes locked on the screen, voice cold as steel. "This isn't a game. This is war. And he's using my language to kill young pilots." Eli clung to his father's sleeve, whispering, "Dad, can you beat him?" Daniel bent, lowering himself to eye level. "It's not about winning. It's about stopping him before anyone else pays the price." Some battles have no victory, only stopped or not stopped, and every second's delay might cost a life. Director Hayes leaned forward, her voice clipped. "We need you to start immediately. But understand, doing this means your cover is gone. No more anonymity. No chance of returning to the life you had." Daniel was silent. His hand found the silver keychain hanging from his pack. A scarred USB glinted under the cold lights. Inside, he still carried the original protocol, never seen by anyone else. He placed it on the table. The small clack rang like a war drum. "This is the original. He can forge many things, but he'll never have this, all eyes fixed on it." Eli stared at the tiny object, whispering, "Just that can save people." Daniel nodded, a faint, weary smile. Sometimes the smallest thing holds the biggest lives. Hayes frowned. "Are you sure you want to give it up?" "It's the last piece of your past." Daniel looked at his son, then back. His voice low, steady. "The past matters less than making sure my son grows up in a safe world." The room thickened with silence. No one spoke. A young officer switched the screen to the incident log. "Today we had 2 near crashes of training planes. Both were new cadets. They were on the counterfeit system." Daniel inhaled, his voice ice. "No more time. We start now." Eli tugged his father's sleeve, whispering, "Dad, I'll sit right beside you. I don't want you to be alone." Daniel ruffled his son's hair. "You'll sit with me. But remember, if I tell you to step back, you must listen. Because sometimes protecting means standing 1 step away." Eli bit his lip, nodding hard. "I promise." In a child's eyes, a promise holds the weight of blood. And that was what kept Daniel steady in the storm ahead. Hayes signaled. Military computers blinked awake, cables ready. The silver USB slid into place, screens lighting with original code. White text cascaded. The room filled with keystrokes, rapid and sharp like gunfire. Daniel sat down, lowering his head. His fingers poised over the keyboard. It's time to call the wolf out of the dark. The control room blazed with blue screens. Code streamed like waterfalls. The sound of keys clacking echoed like machine gun fire in the metallic air. Daniel sat before the main monitor. Neon lights split his face into half shadow. Eli pressed close beside him, eyes wide, clutching the seat edge. An officer reported, voice urgent. Morrison has entered the simulator network. He's overriding safety protocols on screen. Trainee flights flickered. Red error dots blinked. A slip of code could plunge a virtual plane into the ground, and with real cadets, that meant real death. Daniel typed rapidly, his voice low, steady. He's using a backdoor from the 2017 module. I warned about it years ago. No one listened. Hayes clenched her fists, eyes tight. Can you block him? Yes. Daniel paused, then slid the silver USB in. The screen lit with raw code, original protocol glowing white. Only the original key can shut the door he's opened. Eli whispered, small but sharp. Dad, like when you use the real key to lock the door, right? Daniel gave a slight nod. Yes. And all he has is a fake copy children see simply. But sometimes that simplicity reveals the deepest truth. Code collided green against red, like two rivers clashing. An officer behind them sweated. He's counterattacking. He knows your code. Daniel's eyes narrowed, fingers hammering. No, he knows part of it. What he'll never have is the logic I buried in the blank spaces. The screen flickered. Morrison's code stabbed at hidden gaps. Alarms blared, access breach. Eli startled, grabbing his father's arm. Dad, is he winning? Daniel didn't answer. His eyes were steel. His fingers flew faster. He thinks I'm just an engineer. But I'm the wolf. And the wolf always knows the forest paths. Suddenly, hidden code flared. Morrison had planted a trap, a backdoor chain. On screen appeared his old signature, MW 2019. Daniel clenched his jaw. He's using my old signature to fake access. Eli leaned forward, pointing. Dad, I remember. In your old notebook, you always crossed the W. Here it isn't crossed. Daniel froze a beat. Then his eyes lit. Yes, that's it. This isn't the original. It's forged. He slammed commands verifying the signature. In seconds, Morrison's counterfeit collapsed, unraveling like rotten netting. Alarm silenced. Green lights blinked steady again. An officer gasped. The boy spotted it. Daniel's gaze stayed on the screen. No, it wasn't a mistake. It was a mark I left on purpose. Only someone who lived with me would notice. He turned to Eli, eyes soft. You just saved a squadron. Eli smiled, eyes shining, lips trembling. I only remembered how you write. Truth is, sometimes a child's memory guards what the world forgets. The monitor flashed, breach terminated. System stable. The room exhaled in unison. Hayes gripped Daniel's shoulder, her voice low, firm. You just stopped a disaster. But Daniel didn't smile. His eyes stayed on the darkened screen. It's not over. Morrison won't stop. Now he knows I'm back. Eli whispered, Dad, will he come for you? Daniel set a hand on his son's shoulder, voice steady. He's been looking for a long time. Now he knows exactly where to knock. Outside, F-35 engines rumbled, heavy as sky heartbeats. Inside, no one spoke. Everyone knew. The real war had just begun. A small suburban airfield. Clear sky, the air smelled of grass and jet fuel. Prop engines thumped like drums of a new day. Daniel Harris stood on the tarmac, windbreaker dark, back straight. Before him, rows of young pilots strapped into simulators. At his side, Eli, now 10, wore a plastic badge scrawled Assistant Instructor in marker. He scribbled notes on a clipboard, sometimes glancing up with pride. A young officer saluted, Sir, system stable. Original protocol fully restored, Daniel nodded, voice steady. Good. Let them fly. But remember, the biggest lesson isn't in the computer. It's in staying calm when everything shakes. Training planes roared upward, slicing the sky. Eli jotted another note. He whispered just for his father, "Dad, I think they're still scared. But with you teaching, they'll be okay." Daniel bent down, eyes soft. Right. Courage isn't not being afraid. Courage is acting even when afraid. Children grasp truths faster. They aren't blinded by status. A luxury car stopped at the airfield gate. Out stepped the woman in purple, once a first-class passenger. No scarf, no arrogance. In her hands, a plaque, Young Veterans Scholarship Fund, founded by Eli Harris. She approached, voice trembling. "Mr. Harris." "I kept my word. The fund is active. And I want it in your son's name, as we agreed." Eli's eyes went wide, glancing at his father. Daniel only nodded, voice low. "Thank you. This time let actions speak." She bowed her head, no excuses. She knew words were hollow without deeds. Another figure appeared, the man from 11A. No expensive suit now, just a plain shirt carrying a small box. He set it on the metal table. "This is the first contribution from my company. For the cadets. I don't need my name on it. Only that they have a chance." Daniel stared straight. No handshake, no smile. Just a curt word, "Good." Forgiveness isn't erasing. It's letting people prove themselves changed. Eli asked quietly, "Dad, do you think they've really changed?" Daniel gave a faint smile. "People don't change in one day. But when they start doing right, that's a beginning." On the runway, a trainer touched down, wheels kissing like feathers. Young pilots cheered over radio. "Sir, we did it." Daniel keyed the comm, his voice deep, warm, "Good. But never think you're invincible. Humility keeps you alive." At that moment, Daniel was no longer the ghost Iron Wolf. He was teacher, father, anchor, and that combination was his greatest legacy. Eli tugged his father's sleeve, pointing skyward. "Dad, I want to fly too." Someday Daniel bent low, pride and worry mingled. "When you're ready. And remember, not to be famous, but to protect others." The sun dipped, golden light spreading across the runway. Their shadows stretched long, merging like a silent vow. This moment needed no first-class audience, no applause. Only one thing, a choice repeated daily. To do what is right, even unseen. The epilogue closed with one line. "Legacy isn't in glory, it lives in everyday choices." On that first-class flight, they had seen more than a man in a worn jacket. They saw a hidden emblem. A father who stayed silent to protect his son, but when truth knocked, he no longer hid. They called him Iron Wolf. But to Eli, he was simply Dad. And perhaps that was the highest badge of all. Fame fades. But the promise to keep a child safe and the courage to rise when others need you endures. True legacy isn't the honors recorded in military files. Legacy is the quiet, steady choices lived each day.